How's it going? My name is Ashley Rose, but you can call me Ash. Welcome to my channel, and I'm here today with Tom from Rise From Your Grave. Before we continue, I do have to let you know we are sponsored by Curse Cosmetics. You can use the code AROSEDISTORTION. That is my handle. You can get up to 10% off. Also, if you just click the link in the bio, or even go to our website at deatharts13, that's 1313.com. Click makeup. That supports me as well, and of course, all of our sponsors, everything on there as well. So, Tom, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. It's nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, it's great to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, let's go into the gist of things. I heard you actually on the We Are Horrors compilation album, the second one.
Nice.
Very solid track, very good. I dig it.
We're a horror punk band. I guess we could start there. A lot of the influences that I like to pull in, the thing I love about horror punk is I love it to be catchy. So we're very I always call it sing-songy. I want people to sing the songs, so I try to make those songs as catchy as possible. So there's certainly some pop punk elements in that, but a lot of my influences come from thrash music and from 90s and 80s/70s Misfits. But a lot of my exterior influences come from thrash metal, which is kind of how I got into the whole sort of dark music genre in general. So.
Yeah, I sensed a bit of like thrash there. Who's your favorite thrash band, or who was like the one that primarily gave you like influences? I know we got like DRI out there, and
sure. I love a lot of crossover bands. When I first started listening to kind of heavier dark music, I think a lot of people get started with Metallica and things like that, because that's really easy to break into. But as tastes kind of grew, Testament is really one of those old school thrash bands that I really latched onto. DRI is a great crossover band that I love. Municipal Waste is another one. Probably my entire college career, that was like all I listened to was like Municipal Waste. No Use for a Name is another one that I listen to pretty frequently. And then I get into a lot of skate punk stuff as well, your Bad Religion, things like that. So I try to kind of pull all that stuff together in a way that makes sort of a cohesive, catchy element. And I think there's a lot of that stuff in all of that music that kind of really grabs people.
Yeah, Bad Religion is like one of those bands that I hear primarily just in horror punk in general. Is an influence, even in psychobilly. Not necessarily like crazy for me to hear, but it's just surprising that that's one of the primary sounds that everyone, gets attracted to.
Sure.
Is Bad Religion. I mean, Of course, it's always like the Misfits or something, but sure. I always say, like, outside the Misfits, I always hear Bad Religion as another band.
And it could just be because I'm from that, PS1 generation, but I feel like a lot of it has to do with Tony Hawk. I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of guys and gals my age, like they all kind of grasped onto that Tony Hawk soundtrack as like, this is a thing that I didn't think I enjoyed before until now, and now this whole soundtrack is really speaking to me on a level that I didn't understand.
It's a killer soundtrack. It really is. I played Tony Hawk like growing up too. Like as a kid, that was my primary game. Was I good at it? No, I wasn't great at it.
Right.
But I still played it. Also, I think Bad Religion was probably one of the first bands in like that, in our genre. Well, not horror punk genre, just in the punk rock genre.
Sure.
That was on the radio besides like Social D.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
At that time, I'm not talking about like, earlier days like with the Clash or anything like that.
Right.
But just generally in our generation, I think that's probably one of the primary reasons.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, yeah, you're really only scratching the surface. Like like you said, I think they're kind of one of the first ones to hit the radio, and then finding that Tony Hawk soundtrack is like, okay, well, I like this. I know I like these guys. So now I'm being introduced to all this other stuff. And now, so I'm listening to like the Vandals or Real Big Fish or Chuck D, because Chuck D's on that, I think on the second one, and stuff like that. So you're getting introduced to a lot of stuff that you can kind of continue those threads of like, oh, I listened to this, I heard this on the radio. Now I've connected with that, and now I'm kind of moving on forward. And I know a lot of guys and people when I was growing up that really got into like alternative music that way.
I say like Bad Religion's one of those that's surprising to me in a
Mhm.
way. Let's go back to horror punk. What made you get into horror punk? What was the allure? What was the attraction? Was it the storytelling? Was it just what it's about? Like, was it the Misfits? What was
Mhm.
it? Was it just
Well,
horror in general?
yeah. So when I was growing up, a really, really good friend of mine. He's actually the rhythm guitar player for Boogeyman, whom I know has been on your show as well. Ryan's a great
Oh,
dude,
yeah,
but
Ryan's
their rhythm guitar player Dom, him and I have been friends since we were like in kindergarten, and Dom was really into cult classic movies, right? So we were watching a lot of Evil Dead, Rocky Horror Picture Show, stuff like that. And so as I was kind of growing up, we got into horror movies, and a lot, it all started as kind of those silly horror movies or whatever, but it did turn into a love of horror movies. And Dom and myself were in a power metal band when I was in college, which is kind of a pretty vast chasm between power metal and horror punk. There's a wide canyon for Homer to try to skate over top of, but we both loved the Misfits. And that was kind of something that like was sort of growing up as a metal guy. It was like, oh well, I'm not, it's first you're like, I'm not super into punk music right away, right? I'm listening to a lot of thrash metal, and then it's like, okay, well, we like the Misfits, right? Yeah, we like the Misfits. Okay, so we kind of had to work our way into it, and that opened up a lot of doors. But when we were in the band together, as most college bands do, things kind of quit happening, and so Dom now lives in Phoenix with the guys from Boogeyman, and so in like 2017, I really just wanted to get some music out there. I had written a lot of stuff, and this isn't like I'm big into the self-deprecating humor, so if you're cool with that, I'm not a very great guitar
Uncle?
player,
It's
and
not a big deal, man. Go for it.
I'll rag on myself all day. It's fun for me. But yeah, I'm not an amazing guitar player, right? And I don't profess to be. But I had a lot of really cool ideas that I wanted to get out as far as music goes, and I just kept coming back to. I kept coming back to the roots of like, well, I loved Friday the 13th. I love the story I have no mouth and I must scream. Like there are just so many stories in terms of just movies or books or animated things and whatever. Like there's so many things that like I latch onto that I want to talk about, and a lot of this is sort of a thing that I do frequently is that I find parts of horror stories that I find really interesting. So, Bloody Hands, our song off of our first album, it's about Hellraiser. But the song itself is actually just about the like sort of give and take horrible relationship between Julia and Frank. And that's all that song is about. It's not about
Mhm.
any of the Cenobite stuff or anything like
It's
that.
just about their relationship,
Yeah. And I really like
which is
to
toxic and fucked up if y'all have never seen Hellraiser.
absolutely. Yeah,
It's
it's
fucked up on
real messed up.
so many levels. Uh, here.
But yeah, like I've always found those stories within a story interesting. So it became one of those, okay, well, my skill set is because I was a singer, and I am the singer, but in my previous band, my strengths were always writing catchy choruses, writing lyrics and stuff like that. And so when I first started back in 2017, it was like, okay, well, I can take my halfway decent skills at guitar and I can put some songs together in a really simple way and then convey those vocals over top of them. And I'm like, well, that just brings me, again, the lyric ideas and the structures of the song are always bringing me back to horror punk. So I'm like, okay, this is perfect. I can sort of work within my skill set, do something I really really enjoy, and then tell those stories to people. Um, and yeah, I kept coming back to the idea that like this is a genre that I enjoy, and it works with all of the things that I want to do. So let's do it. And so on, I think it was November 2017, we put out our first album, and it's pretty much been history since then.
Such a large roster going on at We Are Horror right now. Like
Yeah.
we're talking about everywhere between the UK to the US now.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? Have you always known like Dan from We Are Horror? 'Cause I know he had a radio station at one time.
He did. Yeah. So when I Dan is actually a lot of the reason that I found the scene in general. A lot of what I was doing early on with our first, I would say, with our first two albums and then our like 5-song EP, I was just kind of doing stuff and throwing it up on the internet and just kind of going, well, here you go, internet, have that.
If it's here you go, I have gifted you the internet gods. This
Right.
track.
Like here, oh, here you go, internet. Just here, just do something with that. But I was so unaware of the greater scene of horror punk at the time, because it was just like I'm doing this. A lot of it I was just doing for me because it was, I wanted to make these songs. I wanted to get that stuff out there, and it was such a nebulous like, well, how do I even get started doing this kind of stuff? That I just wanted to get stuff out there, and shortly after our album Silence Out of Hell, Dan had reached out about doing see, now I'm doing it. The Horror Punk's Not Dead.
That's what I was saying. We Are Horror Punk. I mean, Horror Punk's Not Dead compilation at We Are Horror. There we go. Two. Yeah, he's on.
Yeah, so he reached out
pretty soon.
He reached out about us being on Volume 2. And that was the first time I had really heard from anyone about, being a part of anything. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But, somebody reaches out, and I'm sure with the YouTube channel and stuff, you get people that reach out all the time where you're like, there's absolutely no way in hell I'm answering this email. Like, this has got to be some phishing scam or some shit like that.
I try to answer everyone the best that I can. When I migrated over to, like, I wanted to do my own thing because I was always working for other people.
Sure.
So when I migrated from pro wrestling I wanted to go more into music, so I was helping that platform grow into more of entertainment as well, than just wrestling. And they're still going, they're still got their own thing. Then I was like, I kind of started just gradually doing this channel. And I was like, well, this is doing well, so I'm just going to move over. Always give TWM and Distortion Media, credit for that. For especially that they're still going. I'm happy for them. Like, they're still going, they're still doing everything. It was kind of hard for me to fit everyone's request because I was still involved with like the horror punk community, but not highly because I was concentrating on my other stuff, like my journalism stuff and sports too. That once I started opening back up to it, it just kind of was just it was too much of a flow for me to like control, because I didn't realize. I knew that horror punk bands were still out there. I just didn't know how many new ones there were. Right.
Yeah, and that was like, as you were saying, that was kind of my experience with the scene as well, where it's like, I know the Misfits and I know Blitz Kid and Calibres and stuff like that, but I just had absolutely no idea how many, not just new bands, but how many other bands were just around. And
the ones that are still around that are planning albums for like 2 years that are going to come out next year.
Oh yeah.
Next year, everyone's really lit. Like, I thought this year was like people were going to release albums next year. From my anticipation, there's a lot of new albums that are scheduled to be released from bands that haven't had albums for like years.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah,
So
I mean, from what I know from working with Dan at We Are Horror, I can tell you that I know that there's a lot of cool albums coming out next year. I'm not saying that we might be one of them, but we might be. um, but to kind of go back to the whole We Are Horror thing, Dan really opened my eyes to the whole scene, and so when we put the song out on Volume 2, that was a big moment for us as a band, because it went from, it was a lot of like I said earlier, we're putting this out. I'm just kind of throwing it out into the ether and kind of seeing what happens. And that was a big moment for us in terms of like, okay, now we're part of this community, and now we're seeing the reception to a song that was specifically written for that comp at the time, and it was a bit overwhelming at first, because like I had mentioned earlier, it was very much just like, here you go, like let's throw it out into the ether and see what happens. And then shortly after the compilation came out on Spotify, it became a situation where we're like, oh, people are actually finding stuff. We're, like they're going back and listening to our older music, and they're finding us on socials and stuff like that. And we went from like, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 people on whether it was Instagram or Facebook or whatever, 30, 40 or people, knew who we were. And you know how when things start, it's like, oh, well, you ask your brother or your mom or your aunt to follow you or whatever, just to kind of get those numbers up a little. And it went from like nothing to an astounding amount of people were finding our stuff. And that was my initial interaction with Dan. And a few months ago, let's see, what is it, December? Yeah, yes. Sorry, it's we're getting so close to Christmas, I like lose track of time.
it's going by fast.
Yeah.
Halloween. It
Yeah.
was Halloween, and I was like, oh my god, where did November go? I have no interviews. Well, that's on me because I schedule everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I lost the complete month of November because
it was insane.
I was just dead tired after October and everything.
Oh yeah.
That's the busiest time for our community.
For sure.
Everyone's in demand. Everyone's doing a show.
For sure.
Because everyone wants a horror punk band to play the month of Halloween.
We sure did one of those too. we did a really cool show at the place nearby called the Indiana Theater. They did a zombie walk, and we did a 45-minute set. And then so they did the zombie walk, we played, and then they showed at the theater, they showed Night of the Living Dead and then House on Haunted Hill on the screen. So that was a cool show. But yeah, as far as the We Are Horror record stuff, Dan and I kind of got back in contact sometime in November, and he was looking for somebody to mix one of the bands on the label's album. They just done a short EP, and he needed a hand with mixing. So Ryan from Boogeyman, I guess, had put Dan in contact with me about doing that, and we had just kind of talked back and forth a little bit about oh well, we're kind of free agents right now, since you're a wrestling gal. You get that idea. We're kind of free agents at the moment, so
independent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're doing the indies right now. So I had reached, Dan and I had talked to each other a little bit about doing some of that stuff, and he said, well, I had asked him if there was somewhere for Rise from Your Grave to live on the label, and he seemed to think that was we were a good fit, and so I was very excited about that. And as Dan and I got to know each other more and more over the last 2 months now, I he has entrusted me with helping We Are Horror Records on the U.S. side of things. So that's he's been a great dude, and I love working with him, and just we have similar work ethics and personalities, and so it's really awesome to be able to be more a part of this community and to learn more about the bands on the label, and then working with them and trying to help the community itself grow, and not necessarily just the label. Obviously, being on the label, I want to help that grow as well. But like there are a lot of cool things that I think the horror punk community can do moving forward to kind of get ourselves out there in front of the right people, in terms of whether it's particular audiences for those bands or just in general. Like Dan and I have got a lot of cool ideas worked up that we're going to try to implement in 2025 to get some eyes on some bands. So I'm really excited about not only Rise from Your Grave being part of We Are Horror Records, but myself as well. I'm really excited. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening.
Do you currently have anything up and coming?
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
But you can't talk about.
We do. I won't say when. We have there's a lot of things happening for Rise from Your Grave itself happening in 2025. We're going to talk about that real soon, because it's going to happen real fast. But
it's right around the corner.
Yeah, seriously. Like once we get into January, we're back in gear. So I'm excited with a lot of the stuff we've got going on. I can't speak too much on it now, but there is a significant amount of music happening from us in 2025. I can say that part.
So let's go back into like influences. I know we're talking about skate punk. We're talking about thrash.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about that all day, you and I.
Sure.
Like I was telling someone like months ago that I went to go see DRI, didn't get a chance to see DRI because a riot broke out.
Oh, cool!
And the opening band.
Nice.
It was shut down, and I had to leave because I was also like, it was an all ages show. So this was roughly, I think I was in high school. I might have been like 17.
Oh yeah. Those are definitely those kinds of shows are the ones you want to get out of there when trouble starts.
We had to leave, but so didn't get to see DRI. Show was shut down. That was like ages ago. I'm like 30. I'm 37 now, so that was a long time ago, but I remember it clearly. We could talk. You and I could talk about that all day, but let's. This is primarily, we are an alternative channel. I consider it a hub. This is considered a home for all horror punk and goth rock in general, and alternative. Anything that meets that standard, whether it be film, music, some type of artistic creative medium, whatever.
Oh man. I mean, I in the last, probably since right before the pandemic, I got really, really into like horror books, like horror literature. And man, if I don't gravitate towards like the most bleak shit in the universe, like and video games is another one that I'm like real into, and I absolutely adore the Silent Hill games. So it's
cool.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah, absolutely. I've got a massive Silent Hill collection. It's basically to the point now where it's like, holy shit, we need to slow down because like we've spent too much money on Silent Hill video games. But
it's cool. It's cool. I mean, when I was affiliated with a different makeup brand, they had a Silent Hill line.
Oh, cool.
So I was in one of those photos, like, so I totally get it.
Yeah.
Now, like, we got a new company, which I love. Check out, Curse Cosmetics, everyone. Use the code AROSEDISTORTION. They handle They have a lot of different makeup, personalities on, well, not necessarily personalities, but they do makeup for like the Black Veil Brides, Motionless in White, and Hyde himself. Yes.
Nice.
So there you go. Another plug in. Inspiration comes based off of mainly, as far as your writing style, comes off literature. So what's your favorite horror literature, whether it be classical, Stephen King, what is it that you're into?
I really love, there's an author, and I think it's a pseudonym, but Nick Cutter. He has a book called The Deep, which is a song off of our Silence Out of Hell album. That's again based on that. But man, just some awesome stuff. The Deep. I think he does The Troop, which is just like the most body horror shit in the like. I usually don't get like if I'm reading a book or listening to it on audiobook, I'm not usually like, oh, that was whatever, it's a book. Like I imagine it in my brain, so I get to make it how gross or not gross I want it to. But that was definitely one. That was definitely one where I like finished reading it and I was like, okay, well,
what do I do in life now?
Yeah, what do I do with my hands? I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. But man, was it messed up. But like so good, and the characters are well done and interesting, and yeah, Cutter does a lot of great stuff that I like. Early on, he's a horrible human being. I'm just gonna preface with that now. But the cosmic horror stuff of like Lovecraft, I found interesting. Apart from him being a horrible piece of shit racist, which I don't read those parts.
Yeah, well, everyone mentions Lovecraft regardless, sure. So like, there's no way getting around it.
Yeah.
As far as literature, I always found that like, I've talked to several. Yeah, as I've already talked to several people in this, just from the other site and my own platform.
Right.
I found it very interesting how many people. It wasn't necessarily film that they wrote a lot of their songs about.
Yeah.
The literature.
Oh, that's yeah. I'm also surprised to hear that. I thought I was kind of on an island for that one.
No. Actually, when I interviewed Nim Vind, did you know a lot of his songs are based off of Stephen King?
I did not know that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
All these tracks, all these years, written about different Stephen King books.
That's pretty awesome.
And
I'm not gonna lie.
There's another writer he likes. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's not horror. It's like survival, like that he's written about too. I can't think of the name of it, but if he was around, he would say it's
right. Yeah, I know exactly how that goes.
I can't think of it, but it was interesting to me to find out after all these years that a lot of those tracks were about literature.
Yeah,
it wasn't necessarily about any type of like film.
Sure.
Personal experience. No, literature.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the 90s era of the Misfits, and this isn't a knock or anything like that, but I feel like the 90s era Misfits kind of
favorite.
They kind of did the like, here's the name of the movie that this song is about, and the whole song is about that thing. And I think
The Shining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're really just hammering that nail into the ground. And so and that's part of the reason why I always tried to find interesting aspects of the stories that I want to, if I want to talk about, like, again, I'll go back to Bloody Hands. I'll try to find something interesting about the story that I want to talk about and break that down as opposed to just talking about the entire movie or the entire book or whatever it is. I try to find a personal aspect of that piece to kind of bring that idea forward.
It was bothering me, and I had to look it up. It's Cormac McCarthy.
I don't know why, but I was gonna say that because all I could think about is The Road, and I am almost certain that Cormac McCarthy wrote The Road.
He did.
Almost certain.
I had to look it up because it was fucking bothering me. Yes, some of those tracks I've written about different.
That makes sense because Cormac McCarthy novels are bleak as fuck.
No, I feel the same way about 90s Misfits. It's not my most popular era,
Sure.
like with me personally, not
Mm.
because of like, it's not Glenn or it's,
Right.
it's not Danzig. It's just it doesn't hit for me the same way.
Sure. I
And
get that.
that's just based off of like vocal styles. I like a little bit of a deeper uh like I guess I guess I prefer a different style of vocal, like the
Sure.
Damned or like Bajas or things like that.
Right.
Around that, so I
Yeah.
can see that as well.
Yeah, I know, I get it, and I think everybody has sort of, but in the Misfits sort of fandom, there's obviously those three sections of like Danzig, Michael, and Jerry, and so it's like everybody has kind of a favorite, and like Danzig Misfits lyrics are like edgy just to be edgy. I think that's just me. I love Danzig though. Like he's like a cartoon character to me. Like every time I see or think about Danzig, I just think of that like image of him like holding kitty litter in the parking lot.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Aqua Teen.
Oh, but that would have been also a good reference. But yeah, no, like everybody has a preference. I think it all has its drawbacks. I mean, the Misfits aren't perfect in any way, but they are great. They're a fun time. But yeah, the Graves stuff. I think the Graves songs that are great are they are great, right? But it's just like not every song hits right. Like it just doesn't. There's something about his voice that just doesn't work for certain songs and stuff like that. And again, this is just personal opinion, and I agree with you there. Like there are some songs that just don't work.
I mean, I like a lot of the stuff, but it's not something I like dearly love. I don't I own a lot of Misfit stuff.
Sure.
I do. I mean, do I live and breathe the Crimson Ghost? No.
Right.
But I have it because I like it. It's very nostalgic for me in
Absolutely.
general. Same thing with Danzig. I have a lot of Danzig stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just nostalgic for me. That's just my personal preference, but I mean, I do like something from each era of the Misfits.
Oh, absolutely.
Regardless.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's something I always like. So that they're still going.
Absolutely.
So
too bad you can't take videos of Danzig while he's playing, though. He gets real mad about that.
I think he's gotten okay with it. I think.
Really?
I think he's gotten okay with it. I don't personally know, but I think he has because I've seen a lot of videos from shows lately.
Yeah, that was like probably 10 years ago. I saw him, and it was like the Butcher Babies opened up for him, and then like we went to go like take a video, and like a man yelled at us, and I'm like, okay, I wasn't aware we weren't allowed to take videos of Danzig, but
I think it's understandable for the time.
Sure.
There was a lot of stuff going on at that time.
That's true.
Understandable. Your primary writing skill set in horror medium is books and video games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I because I grew up with a lot of PC games, so I got the experience of like, the original Half-Life and Alone in the Dark, the original Alone in the Dark and stuff like that. A lot of old point-and-click games and things like that. And then as time kind of went on, I got into Resident Evil and Silent Hill and then Dead Space and all that kind of stuff. And there's certain aspects of horror that really draw me in.
Dead Space was frightening to me the first time I played it.
It's so good. I actually just convinced a friend of mine to play it because they were like, oh, I don't know. I'm not into space horror. And I'm like, do you like Resident Evil? He's like, yes. And I'm like, do you like Resident Evil in space? And he's like, I think so. And I'm like, okay, go play it. You're fine.
Yeah, I prefer Resident Evil. I'm a big Resident Evil fan. Mm-hmm. So I play Resident Evil. I always ask that question. I know it's a generalized question, but it always interests me as far as, where the songs are actually generating from.
Sure.
Versus about experiences or the whole Universal monsters thing. Let's talk about Frankenstein, everyone and some werewolves, but when you
I'm
say
trying
that,
really hard, by the way. There's a whole thing with a universal monster that's happening for some music for us, and I'm really trying to keep my mouth shut. But I'm real excited. Real excited about it.
but you know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
I'm always interested in. I guess yeah, you know that stuff's cool, but I'm always interested in like horror punk or horror rock that's based off of something I'm not exactly sure what it could be about.
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's a lot more of that now than I think there ever used to be. I think just like Boogeyman, I know I keep bringing him up because I love those dudes. But
Brian's a cool guy, you
he's
know.
great. He's a
So
great
I'm
dude.
cool with it. You can talk about them as much.
Yeah. But like they're the way that they put their lyrical content together, so their albums are both connected and it's the same story. And like kudos to them. Cuz it's awesome. And they have like a comic book and like that's awesome. Just I love the idea that there are bands out there trying to do something different, trying to make their lyrical content about something other than just okay. And I'm guilty of it too. Like we've got on our first album we've got a song called 13 about Friday the 13th and stuff like that. So, there are songs out there by myself included that are about, Freddy and Frankenstein and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And that's all fun.
it's all fun, but
Yeah.
I've always like found interest in horror punk that writes outside
Absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
the generalized horror I mean just the generalized like horror film medium.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I always found it interesting that a lot of people took things out of literature
Hmm.
in school. To me, uh, to several bands, and let's go. I remember telling this to Nate from Pretty with the Lights Out. Horror punk's gone so like we've evolved. If we're talking about first, like it's in waves. We got first wave and second wave,
Hmm.
and then now I would consider this roughly we're getting into third wave,
Hmm.
where the sound is evolving into different aspects of what is alternative. It's
Hmm.
not just the standard doo-wop sound anymore.
Sure.
We're combining other elements of punk and
Yeah.
goth rock.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's what's
interesting.
great about everything that's going on right now. So I would consider this roughly, we're probably entering third wave, I think, or this is
Sure.
third wave. I mean, I don't know what else to call it, but we're going to have a resurgence.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think I like the idea that that everybody is pulling in something different that is a sound that they want to not necessarily emulate, but a sound that they want to incorporate in their music. The Dahmers is a band that I listen to pretty regularly in my or overall horror punk playlist. And I love their kind of like surf rocky spacey sound that they use. And it's one of those, and I've probably talked about it before when I talked to Will over at Heartfelt Horror, that it's one of they'll write something, and that's what I really enjoy as an artist as well, is like someone will write something, whether it be somebody like I know like Boogeyman or a band that I just listened to as a fan, and I go, man, I wish I had written that. Like, man, I wish I had written.
Why didn't I think of it?
Right, right. But the idea that again, to go back to this Dahmer's example, it's like I don't have the influences that they do, or I haven't consumed the same music that they have for that to be an influence for me. So it's a cool thing to hear. Okay, this is horror punk, and we're horror punk, and I'm not going to write the same thing as they're going to write, and they're not going to write the same thing I'm going to write. And it's interesting to kind of, because I'm also meticulous about if I find something that I like, I always try to kind of bore down it. That's the ADHD talking. Is I like to bore down into what makes the thing that I like the thing that I enjoy. Like, why is it that I like this thing? And so I'll spend 45 minutes, I'll listen to the same song over and over and over and over and over again until I finally understand this is the sound, this is the part of this sound that I really enjoy. And I would never be able to write it because I don't have the influences that those guys have. But it's so interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, where can everyone find you besides your horror records?
Oh yeah, so you can find us on Facebook. I believe it's Rise from Your Grave Punk on Facebook, and everywhere else should be RFYG Horror Punk. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Slasher. We're on Slasher as well.
I'm on Slasher as well.
Yeah. It's a cool platform because I get to see little indie studios coming up with stuff, and
they have a whole list of bands of horror rock bands there, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool platform. If you're into horror at all, it's great because like I said, people will just we've probably got in the last week or so a bunch of followers on there, and it's just okay, these guys are making an independent film, and so I can watch that, and this guy does top 10 lists of his favorite kills from movies, and I'm oh cool, I never would have thought of, I would have never seen this otherwise, and stuff like that. So it's a really neat little platform. I dig it.
All right. Well, once again, I'm here with Tom from Rise from Your Grave, and once again, my name is Ashley Rose. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe, follow button, and if you're hearing it on audio, I'm here for you. You can't see this, but if you're on Spotify, you will be able to see the video. So good night, good day, good morning, wherever you are.